Why don't we start with your name?
Well, my name is Julius Caesar.
So your parents named you after a historical figure?
No. You see, I am Julius Caesar.
Okay, well, we need to establish some facts about your personality, so why don't you tell me a bit about yourself?
Well, where do I begin? I guess most people think that I started by being emperor. Are you writing this down? But that's actually not true, because the first thing I did is I built the pyramids. And I know most people think it was Cleopatra, but she had nothing to do. And actually, most people think that she's very tall, whereas that's not true at all. Oh, write down looks good for his age. Actually, no, don't write that. Write down looks. And then after I invented Taylor Swift, I have to figure out a way to beat Muscus to Mars, because I have to be the first person to build a Martian world wonder. But, okay, that's enough about me. How about instead we talk about my ego and thousands of years of repressed mental issues?
Yes, Civilization is a computer game. We all played it for a gajillion hours and love it and yada yada yada. Instead, let me get straight to the good stuff, because Civilization A New Dawn features one of the coolest action selection mechanisms we've ever seen. Everything you want to do in Civilization is governed by 5 cards. Die-hard fans of the weird solipsistic in a good way history simulator will instantly recognize these crowd favorites, such as Early Empire, something that's probably a study of all the people called Mason, a typo on astronomy, camels, and getting high. On your turn, choose one of these and do a cool action, such as building a city or a world wonder, or sending the cavalry out, which is a portmanteau of camel and cavalry, just in case it wasn't clear. But just as cool as the actions are themselves, which we'll get to in just a bit, are the consequences of what happens when you choose a particular card. I don't know what it is about Civilization-themed board games and conveyor belts of cards, but this game also has one. Each card is in a slot, and each slot is assigned a number, from 1 to 5. Now choose a card under 5 and do its action, and it is the best possible action that card will do. But then, if you do that, all the other cards slide to the right, and the particular card you chose goes to slot number 1. The worst one. But, as they say, you can't build Rome every day. Wait a minute. No, yeah, that's right. Let's explore how this works in practice. I have found the best spot to build Orange's new city. First of all, it's on a mountain, which means it's going to be a lot harder to attack. It is right next to a resource which I will be able to claim later because it's next to a city. And finally, it is far away from any of the other players, which means that caravans will take ages to get here. But because the particular slot I want to interact with is a mountain, well, that means only a card in slot 5 will ever be able to achieve that. So before I take the pottery action, which does let me build a city, I will have to figure out a good way to activate astrology and masonry so I can edge it all the way to the right. So, what's stopping you from taking whichever action is in slot number 5 and just activating that all the time? Well, nothing, but you'll lose. See, here's the thing. Each game we will deal out 3 objective cards. Each of them have 2 objectives on them. Complete 1 objective on each card, such as, for example, advancing your tech tile all the way to the end, or building 2 yellow wonders, or having 5 mature cities, and you will win the game. There are no victory points as such or anything else. It's just a race to the finish. So you haven't got any time to dilly-dally by only doing the best thing. You might want to activate a certain action many times because each of these objectives is tied to a particular action card mechanically. As we say in Lithuania, the train does not wait for the pooping man. I'm not joking. That is an actual saying we have in Lithuania. We wait for women though. They can poop for as long as they like. Language. We kind of skipped over the theme of this game, but that's because the theme is civilization. I mean, what else is there to say apart from whether the theme comes through or not? And honestly, the answer is maybe because this game is abstracted to a point where some of you will just look at it and go, nah, there isn't enough Civ in Civ. But for me, actually, the bleeding, pumping heart of Civilization is inside this box. Because I guess unlike some other people, and like people who expect that sort of weird solipsistic nature of the game, which I totally get, by the way. If we go back to the times of wee little Efka, when I have first discovered Civilization and played Civ 2, and by that time Civ 2 was already in its heyday, and I discovered all these reskins where you could, for example, play as fantasy races, and suddenly I could have a civilization of elves or mushrooms, and that was for me equally as cool as this kind of anachronistic history mumbo jumbo. And if you're after that, if you're after a sense of journey, then you definitely get it here. Each time you advance in tech, you advance a number of spaces on this dial. The number of spaces you advance in is the same as the slot that the tech card that you activated was in. But once you hit a certain marked location on the tech dial, that's when you get to dip into this stack of new technology cards, meaning you get to replace one that was already in here with a new one. It'll still do the same action, it'll just do it in a slightly different way. Do you want to slowly conquer the world by drowning it in the opium of social media, or do you want to submerge it in the blissful sleep of nuclear fallout? Your choice. Some of the things, though, it does even better than its video game counterpart. Now, I know that we already mentioned this, but I think some of the reviewers will mention that how this is an abstracted experience, a truncated version of the video game. And abstraction isn't the worst thing in the world, especially if it makes the game smoother and neater, like Celery. And that is more true than ever if the actions connect, if they bleed into each other. Building a city connects into building wonders, connects into advancing technology, and so on. Every step of the puzzle asks you, what do you want to do next? And that is a very interesting question. And then you spot the tightness of the design when you realize that some of the actions are a little bit more circumstantial. And you think, well, wait a minute, that isn't very good, because an action such as under the masonry card where you get to attack someone, you don't always want to do, because there are situations when there is nothing to attack. So what happens? Are you just stuck with masonry in slot number 5 until you decide to take it and not do anything just so you could slide other cards into that slot? No, because masonry has a second option, such as reinforcing your cities with tokens, making their defense better, and that's especially good if you have a mature city. Did I just say a mature city? Yes, I did. Ladies and gentlemen and gentlefolk, there are cities in this game that can be taken from their prepubescent zit stage to something a little bit more profound.
And now, a moment with New York City.
Hi, my name is New York, and, of course that's not what my parents called me. My parents called me, New Amsterdam, but I didn't like that name very much, and it didn't represent me, and I was going through my rebellious stage, and then I decided to change it. Of course, as I grew up, I developed more of a social consciousness, because there are many issues to worry about in the cities. Even though I feel more mature, we aren't really perfect. There's a lot of issues, gentrification and homelessness. But I think as cities, we shouldn't worry about what we don't do, and we should worry about what we do. I said do.
So yeah, all these actions are exciting, they're engaging, they're an interesting puzzle to solve, but you might have noticed that we've omitted describing one action so far, and that's combat. Because it's, activating the masonry card, picking an opponent, rolling a die, and seeing who gets higher. Okay, that's not entirely fair. There are other mitigating circumstances. For example, have you worked hard to push your masonry card all the way to slot number 5? Have you acquired wonders that help you in attacking or defending? And have you spent time reinforcing your defensive position with reinforced tokens? Or maybe whatever target you picked is in an elevated terrain, such as mountains, making them harder to attack. With all these mitigating circumstances, it is still just rolling a die. And if you're new to cardboarding, you might be asking,
Well, what's wrong with that? Variety, after all, is the spice of life. But if you've been playing games for a while, you'll have seen some very simple and elegant ways of handling combat. So I'm not really buying the argument that the reason combat is just a die roll-off is because they wanted to keep the game simple and elegant. And here's the thing, when you roll a die, you are not really making choices in the engagement. All you're doing is choosing to engage. And that's dull. And here's the thing, I am so far to lose this game. I'm not bragging, whilst I think I'm okay at games, I had my chits handed back to me more times than someone started a thread on Board Game Geek about app-based board games. But the reason I'm bringing this up at all is because you'd think that having an unbroken streak in a game would make me feel good about it. I think it's very telling that instead, I feel a little bit let down. The last time I had an unbroken streak was Terra Mystica. It didn't last, by the way. A game where every single move is a challenging puzzle. And whilst that game made me feel like every time I've played it, I had to fight tooth and nail for victory, Civilization made me feel like the puzzle was already solved before I've even chosen my first card. These free victory condition cards are effectively a race. It doesn't matter that your civilization is so technologically advanced that you can view your opponents as Einstein observes shrimp in a fish tank. As long as they get to these objectives first, they win. And that's, in a way, great. It's thematic. It's what makes civilization. It's a race. But oftentimes you'll just have someone who'll figure out how to activate these actions slightly more efficiently, and then you'll have like 3 or 4 turns left in a game. But it will be clear that you've lost. And you'll just have to sit there waiting. Technically, you have a choice in how you're going to develop your civilization. Are you going to be technologically advanced and choose all kinds of cool technologies, or are you going to build statues and pyramids? Perhaps you're going to surround yourself with mature cities, or maybe you're going to build even more statues and pyramids. But what's happening here really is that you want to have the least amount of activations of these cards possible before you get to the finish. So, building a lot of statues is not a great idea. If you choose 2 objectives to be building world wonders, then you're just trying to edge the pottery card towards slot number 5 more times than you should. And if on top of that you choose one of your objectives to be based on cities as well, which are built with the same card as world wonders, then you pretty much put yourself into a trap. So really, you haven't really got a choice here. You're just trying to have the least activations. And unlike other Euro strategy games that are races, like the Oracle of Delphi or Rajas of the Ganges, technically, you have an answer. You can attack! You can muster every hoplite that you have and launch every rapier, musket and potlet at your opponent. But the thing is, as long as they've already achieved their objective, you can take away as many wonders from your opponents as you like. For the purposes of this game, their achievement counts. That's just as well, because I would rather end the game there than protract the foregone conclusion in an awkward back and forth like being on a bad first date, where you feel like you have to say things even though you know you're never going to see each other again. And that's our experience of this box. And maybe, just maybe, you'll open this enough times with your friends where that tactical stalemate blossoms into a real wonderful mind game. But I would rather play something where that tactical mind game is immediately emergent, such as the ever wonderful Tigris and Euphrates. And yet, Civilization A New Dawn is not leaving my collection. Yes, it's flawed, but do you know what? Pancakes are often flawed, and yet we still eat them. But there are so many good strategy games, I hear you say. Games that are adored and beloved by many. Why eat this burnt pancake when you can have a nice one with pralines? Well, because it's a civilization pancake. Also, there's a Lithuanian saying where the first pancake is always burned.
but it doesn't really apply here. For many of us who've been rocking the SS Cardboard for a while, there are just better strategy games out there. But I would posit that this is a great gateway game. Now, board game people are obsessed with this idea that people have to start with Ticket to Ride or Pandemic, even though you might not like trains, and who likes diseases exactly? And whilst I agree that for most people those are the games to start with, but if you're a die-hard fan of Civ and you want to give this board gaming thing a lark, this is just such a great place to start. You'll find familiarity here, and the score mechanism is just so intuitive, you'll just get it. So this is a good game. If you're trying to get into games and you like Civ, just know that along the line, there are better games out there. Maybe with a different theme.
Yeah, I'm responsible for many foods. I invented spaghetti and I invented linguine. And of course, the famous spaghetti versus linguine wars, that was all me. Not the only food. I invented escargot. Without me, French wouldn't know what snails are. And of course, the Statue of Liberty, that was me. The original one and the one in France. And then after that, I introduced dumplings to the Swedes. You know, the meat dumplings, but they eat it with strawberry sauce. That one even I can't claim responsibility for. Many famous people. I invented Molière, Shakespeare. I invented Al Murray, which didn't quite turn out the way I wanted. This has been going on for a while. Do you have a watch? Because I really can't keep track of time.